Welcome to the AT Parenting Survival Podcast, where you get help and guidance through the chaos of parenting a child with anxiety or OCD. This show is for educational purposes and is not intended to replace the guidance of a qualified professional. Here's your host, child therapist, Natasha Daniels.
Well, hello there, and welcome to another episode of the AT Parenting Survival Podcast. Today, I want to talk to you about something that you may not realize is really common with children who are struggling with OCD. And that is, I don't know. Why do you do that? I don't know. What scares you? I don't know. Right? Does that sound familiar? That could be really frustrating when you're just trying to help your child or teen and you're trying to explore what's going on and what their struggles are, and you're hitting a brick wall. And so today we're going to talk about what's behind the I don't know, because there is a reason why I don't know is so prevalent in children with OCD. But before we get started, I do want to thank NoCD, talking about OCD. NoCD offers affordable, effective, convenient therapy, and they're available in the US and outside the US. And you can schedule your free 15-minute consultation to see if NoCD is a right fit for you and your child. Just go to treatmyocd.com. That is treatmyocd.com. I'll leave a link in the show notes as well. All right, so let's dive into this today. So the first thing I want to mention is that I don't know in general is very common in adolescence. Teenagers say I don't know a lot, but there is meaning behind I don't know. And I think often as parents, educators, therapists, we discount it, and sometimes I'm going to talk about this in a little while, we take it personal because we feel like they're purposely not sharing information. They're being difficult. And with OCD, there are very specific, unique, different reasons why kids say, I don't know. And so I'm going to go over the most common reasons, and I have 7 of them. That's not an exhaustive list. There's probably more. I'm sure there's more. These are just the most common ones that I saw in my practice. So we're going to dive into those 7, and then I'm going to talk about what parents often do that does not help this situation. And then after the break, we'll talk about what to do instead, because the ultimate goal is that every episode that you listen to, you have concrete takeaways that you can go and practice or implement with your kids right after you listen to this episode. That's my hope and my goal, and I hope that you get that from my podcast episodes. All right, so coming in at number 1, let's just tackle the most common one, the most obvious one, the one that you think of when you think of a child saying, I don't know, and that is that they're overwhelmed. But I want to go deeper even with that one is just because a child has OCD or they're doing compulsions or they're asking you for compulsive reassurance doesn't mean that they understand what is happening to them. It doesn't mean they all of a sudden understand their OCD theme. They understand their core fear. They understand what's driving their OCD underneath everything. You can suffer and not have any insight whatsoever. In fact, most people do until they learn. OCD is very counterintuitive, and it has to be taught. It has to be taught even when you're struggling with yourself. It has to be taught like this is what's happening around this. So they may really not know, and they may get frustrated because they are so overwhelmed with all of these intrusive thoughts and feelings that when you're starting to be like, why is that happening? They don't know. And so they get frustrated. I don't know. I really don't know. And that's the response you get. The other thing is how we ask. And we will go into that also when we talk about things to do and not to do, is how we ask questions actually can really indicate how open a child's going to be. So when you say things like, why can't you touch that door handle? Why do you take 30-minute showers or 3-hour showers? Why can't you touch your brother? Why don't you want to eat that? You said you were hungry. The common denominator in everything that I just said is why. Why can't you sleep? Why can't you eat? Why can't you do that? Why are you taking 30-minute showers? Why are you taking 3-hour showers? I keep saying 30 minutes and I realize, no, if it's OCD, it's a lot longer. Why, the word why can put us on the defensive because inadvertently, and you probably have heard me say this before, if you follow me for any length of time, because this is something I really get on my soapbox about, is that why makes people defensive. And it's like, we're not purposely trying to get people to feel defensive. It's a normal question. We want to know, like, why can't you eat that sandwich that you said you wanted and you were hungry? But it can feel like an attack. So when we're trying to explore things and kids are getting defensive, it's easier and better and more productive to say, what? I know that sounds so weird, but validate it. I can tell that you're having a hard time in the shower. I can tell that it's taking a very long time to get out of the shower. What is the hardest part about taking a quick shower? Or I knew you were hungry and I made you the sandwich and then I saw that you really struggled and you couldn't eat it. What was the hardest part about eating it? It sounds like semantics. It sounds like, really, Natasha? What is the big deal? But honestly, if you sat on the opposite end of a couch for 2 decades trying to get kids and teens to talk, and it was a very long day every day, you would learn the difference very quickly. You would learn that when I say why, I shut people down. And when I say what, some people open up. And it does make a difference. It may not open up this tightly wrapped box that is not going to talk, but for some kids, just shifting your language is a good first step. Now, that tip and that first reason why people say, I don't know, is universal. And so it's not just for OCD. That is, if you're talking to your partner or a friend or a family member, switch it to what? What's the hardest part about doing this? What's the scariest part about doing this? Instead of why, because when you say why, people get defensive. Okay, moving on to number 2. Now we're going to get into the OCD weeds. So buckle up. So the second common reason why kids with OCD say, I don't know, is that they are afraid of being triggered. OCD is so scary, and people really part of the disorder is avoiding being triggered. So avoidance is a compulsion in and of itself, and people spend a lot of energy not doing or being around things that will trigger their OCD, not thinking about things that will trigger their OCD. And so when we want to talk about OCD, that could be very overwhelming because kids can be afraid that they're going to spin out of control, that you're going to remind them they have all these intrusive thoughts. And now it's going to get worse, especially for the kids that use distraction as their number one unhealthy coping mechanism. So the kids that have to constantly keep busy, watch TV or be on their phone or do something different, because the minute they have downtime, all their intrusive thoughts come back. That's a very avoidant person, and their unhealthy coping mechanism is to keep busy. And so you asking something about their OCD is like someone trying to avoid looking at a shot, and you're like, oh, this actually kind of reminds me. I do not like getting my blood taken. When I was younger, I passed out once. My kids have a hard time as well. And so when I'm getting blood work done, I will look away from them. I will tell them I don't want to focus on it, and I'll try to find something in the office to distract my mind. So I love the people who put family photos or cartoons up or even pictures, because it's something that I can anchor my brain on. But the minute they say something like, ooh, that's a juicy one, or oh, that one's rolling. These are all things I've heard. Or I just can't find a vein. Oh, I missed it again. Any comment like that brings me back to what I'm trying to avoid, and it makes me very frustrated. That's the same thing for people with OCD when they're trying to avoid thinking about it. Now, it's not a good thing, and I'm not saying that we want to accommodate that, but we can't force things on our kids, we have to meet them where they're at, and we have to understand where they're at. And the first step in this is really understanding the origin of why they're saying, I don't know. And so if I understand what it's serving their overwhelm. They don't know because they really don't know. Or they feel judged because I said why. And they're like, they feel stupid now and they feel judged. Wasn't my intention, but they do. Or the third one, it's actually the second one because I combined the first two, is they're afraid they're going to be triggered. And so they don't want to talk about it because they don't want to have more intrusive thoughts. Okay. The next one, the third one, because I kind of smushed two together. The third one is, this one gets missed a lot. And even therapists don't often know this, but OCD will demand that a person don't talk about it. And I feel like OCD is like a mafia. It's like a mafia boss. That's how I view OCD. And it bullies people and it extorts people and it bribes people and it threatens people. And the OCD mafia is like, you talk about me and I'm going to hurt somebody in your family. Like that is the OCD. That is the OCD bossiness. And so often, and this could be in any theme, whatever their theme is, OCD says, if you talk about it, it's going to happen. So some magical thinking. So it's not the more generalized fear of being triggered that I just talked about in the second one. This is specific. This is very compulsive. This is OCD saying you cannot talk about it or something bad will happen. Or it's a threat. Whatever that threat is, that's what OCD is saying. And so to not speak about it is a compulsion. It's literally a compulsion. And so they want to talk about it. Some people want to talk about it. And it is purely because OCD is saying, don't you do it. Don't you do it. Because if you do that, X, Y, and Z is going to happen. Okay, on to number 4. Number 4 is super common as well. And this one gets missed too. If your child is struggling with moral OCD themes, which is the fear of being a bad person, doing something bad, turning into a bad person, or having done something bad. Sometimes we call this religion OCD. Sometimes it's called scrupulosity OCD. It doesn't have to be a religious-based fear. But the idea that I'm going to do something or I have done something wrong is the theme. We call that moral OCD. And one of the common intrusive thoughts around moral OCD is the fear of lying. And so people who are worried about lying don't want to say something that may not be true. And so they say something and then OCD's like, are you sure? Are you sure that's true? Or did you just lie to her? Do you want pizza or you want pasta? I want pizza. OCD. Are you sure you want pizza? Or do you just lie to your mom? You don't want pizza. You don't care about pizza. And so when speaking becomes part of the intrusive thought and the fear is that they're lying, they start to say, I don't know. Now with this, if you're concerned and you have a child with moral OCD themes, something to pay attention to is they'll often also do other things around their theme. They might confess thoughts and behaviors that they may have done or not done, or they think about and think are bad. They may ask for compulsive reassurance. Is this a bad thing? They might have to replay events over and over, whether they are real life events or things that might happen, and ask the right, like the morality questions around it. Is that, am I a bad person if kind of questions can be a clue. The other thing to pay attention to in their language is they soften their language because of this fear of lying. And so not only do they say, I don't know, but when they make a decision or they answer a question, they will soften it by saying things like, I think, I guess. Do you want pizza or pasta? I want pizza, I think, right? Or do you want pizza or pasta? I want pizza, I guess. And sometimes it is so subtle, or it's even under their breath, that you will not notice it. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. You're like, oh my gosh, she does that with everything she does. So pay attention to that. That can actually be something really helpful if you are dealing with moral OCD and you're wondering if the excessive I don't knows are coming from that. A lot of times with this particular issue, you're getting I don't knows for a lot of really basic things. Like, do you want to go to bed? I don't know. Do you want to eat? I don't know. How was school? I don't know. Like really basic things. Not just things like, did you steal your sister's iPad? That's different, right? I don't know because I don't want to get in trouble. But really basic questions too. So that's something to pay attention to. Okay, on to number 5. This one I don't see as often, but it is something that can happen, which is I'm saying I don't know because what if what I tell you doesn't feel right? So this is going to like a just right OCD theme where things need to feel just right. And so I might answer, but it doesn't feel right. And so instead of getting into that loop of discomfort, I'm going to just tell you I don't know because then I can circumvent the whole thing by not answering you at all. So that's number 5. Oh, actually, there's only 6 of them. Well, I guess there really technically were 7 because I did 2 for number 1. But the last one is, I would venture to say, one of the most common. I've said that for the last 2. So I feel like OCD telling you not to talk, moral OCD and thinking you're lying, and the one I'm about to go into, those 3 are the most common when it comes to like OCD themes. I guess they're all kind of common when I look at them. But this one's important. When kids and teens have sexually taboo themes, they say, I don't know because they're too embarrassed. And so a lot of times I'll see this around contamination. When the therapist or the parent is trying to figure out what is ground zero, the core fear around the contamination. Because contamination isn't just about germs. So if somebody's not touching a doorknob, a good therapist or an educated parent knows that they're going to want to get to the core fear around the contamination. What is contaminated is the question. That's the $1 million question. And that's really where you start when you're doing contamination OCD ERP, which is exposure response prevention, a type of therapy that is the go-to evidence-based approach for childhood OCD. And you can't do that until you find out what the source of contamination is. Otherwise, you're just swatting at flies and you're not getting to the core. And so when you're like, what does OCD say is on the doorknob? And they're like, I don't know. Well, if you touch the doorknob and then, you touch your backpack, what are you spreading? That's a very specific question. And kids with contamination OCD, they absolutely know the answer to that. But when they say, I don't know, a lot of times it's because they don't want to tell you that it's semen. Because bodily fluids in particular, they're okay talking about pee and poop, a lot of them. But when we get into the semen and we're talking about masturbation and intrusive thoughts of spreading their semen, which is incredibly common, you're going to get a very firm, I do not know, because it's embarrassing. And they don't think anyone else has those things. And so that's a common roadblock. If we are not talking about contamination OCD, but they're having intrusive thoughts that are sexually taboo in nature, which is very common. I'm afraid I'm staring at her private parts, or I'm afraid I want to, have sexual relations with my dog. These are common, but people don't want to talk about them. And when you ask them about it, you get a very firm, I don't know, because it's embarrassing. Okay, so those were the top 6. It's not exhaustive. There could be more, but those are the obvious ones. Feeling overwhelmed. 1.B is kind of how you're asking it. So with the why questions. Number 2, fear of being triggered. Number 3, OCD is demanding that you don't talk or it will get worse, which is different than being triggered. It's like a compulsive thing. 4, we got the moral OCD and the fear of lying. 5, what if the answer doesn't feel right? And 6, sexually taboo themes that are too embarrassing to talk about. Okay. Let's talk about you. What are some things that we do as parents that do not help? Well, we do a lot of things. I do a lot of things. It's hard not to. So that's the caveat for this list is you're going to mess up. I mess up all the time. It is a humbling experience to have the clinical knowledge of how to help my kids and just not be able to do it because I'm human. And we are going to have our emotions. We're going to have our patience tested. Things are going to happen. And so we are literally, all of us are going to do things at times that are not therapeutic or ideal. But let's talk about a few of those. And I've done all of these. So the first one is just kind of drilling into them and repeating that question over and over because it can get frustrating. Like we just want to know. And especially for parents that are new to my community, especially those that join my AT parenting community, they're very enthusiastic about finally finding resources, finally being told what to do and how to help their child. And so they've got direction finally. That's the typical member in the AT parenting community is a parent who finally has direction and has wanted direction this entire time. So they have all these tools, and then now they need to apply it to their child. And their child is not budging. And it's like they just hit this brick wall. And the frustration is palatable because they're like, oh, I know how to help you now, but I can't even do step one because you're not willing to talk to me. And so they drill it in. They continually repeat the questions over and over. They don't leave the conversation, and the child shuts down. So that obviously not good. We've all been there. We've all done that. The second thing is sometimes pressuring the child to give you a real answer. And so I see this in a couple of the different themes that we talked about. When kids say, I don't know, and they're afraid they're lying, us being like, you need to tell us, you need to be honest. So when you're saying things like that, that's actually more triggering for moral OCD. So pressuring them to give you a real answer. And if they don't know the answer because of overwhelm, which we talked about before, or because they're afraid of being triggered, or they're afraid that OCD is going to do something really bad if they talk to you against OCD's will, then you pressuring them to give you a real answer isn't the problem. It's all the other things that I listed. So the pressure to give them a real answer as if it's a disciplinarian issue isn't going to work. The other thing I want to mention is sometimes they are giving you the real answer. So in OCD themes like disgust-based OCD themes, where the core fear is the feeling of disgust, and in just right OCD, where the core fear is the feeling of it not feeling just right. So when you're going down that rabbit hole and you're asking questions like, when you're wiping, because this is a common one actually, what does OCD say to you will happen if you don't wipe completely? And somebody with disgust OCD will say, nothing will happen. It just feels gross. It's just disgusting. Yeah, but what will happen if you don't wipe well enough? You're wiping and wiping until you're bleeding. What will happen if you don't wipe well enough? It's just gross. And then sometimes therapists or parents will say, honestly, we can't help you until you help yourself. What are you afraid of? I'm not afraid of anything. It's just disgusting. You know what? You're not opening up today. We can't talk. and the child leaves frustrated because they're being honest. Disgust is the last thing. You hit the end of the rabbit hole. That's the bottom. Same thing with just right OCD. Well, what will happen if you don't tie and retie your shoes over and over again? Well, it won't feel right. But what bad thing will happen if you don't do that? Nothing. It just will feel weird. Okay, but what is OCD saying will happen if you don't tie it tight enough? Nothing. It just doesn't feel right. That's the end. That's the bottom of the rabbit hole. So sometimes when we pressure them to give us, quote unquote, the real answer, we've gotten the real answer and we're not accepting it because we don't understand all the vastly different OCD themes. And if you don't know the OCD themes and you're new to my podcast or new to OCD, I do have a free OCD PDF that goes through all the common OCD themes so that you can understand them and understand the flavors and the disguises that OCD will often morph and shift into. Because just because your child has one flavor, let's say they have moral OCD, it doesn't mean that like tomorrow or next month they can have symmetry OCD or harm OCD. And if you don't know what those are, you're going to miss them. You can check out that free PDF at natashadaniels.com/OCD themes. Understanding those things can help. All right, the next one is sometimes feeding into it and offering reassurance, especially if it's a theme. And so when it's like moral OCD and they're afraid they're going to lie, and you just being like, you're not lying. You can just tell me the truth. It's not a lie. Sometimes you're speaking directly to OCD. So the reassurance is different for each reason, as far as, the reason why they're saying I don't know. But with moral OCD and just kind of like rationally processing with them why they're not lying, is then you're participating in OCD. It's better just to call it out and be like, it sounds like OCD is making you worried that you're going to lie. And by saying, I don't know, it's actually growing your OCD, because that's kind of compulsion. And so the best way to fight OCD is to do what OCD doesn't want. And OCD doesn't want you to just throw out an answer. And it may be wrong, it may not be, but it's your best guess. And that is okay. So that's one way to approach that. Another thing that parents can do, and this one is understandable, but not great to do, is guessing for them. Or worse, spoon feed them the answers. And so when you're like, well, is it because it's semen? Or is it because it's dust? Or do you think that like my breath is contaminated? Or, so when you're guessing what their theme is, or what their core fear is, or what their compulsion's about, or what their intrusive thought is, you are suggesting things, which is not helpful, because not probably for the reason that you're thinking, which is, oh my gosh, then they're going to have that thought too. I'm not worried about that, because I do feel like we need to educate our kids on all these topics and themes. But what will happen is they get fed up with you and they're like, yes, it's that one. And now you have no idea. You told them that their contamination is about dust, and now you're telling the therapist it's about dust, and now you're exposing them to dust because you're doing exposure response prevention therapy, and it never was dust. They just wanted you to get off their back, get you off of their back. And when we ask kids closed-ended questions, and when we ask them leading questions, we wind up getting bad data. It's bad data. And then you're going to be doing all this stuff based on bad data, and you really don't have a clue what your child's OCD struggles are, because you just said it for them. So that's like therapy 101, is like no leading questions. So no suggestions, no could it be this, could it be that. So tempting, because it can like speed up, it can speed up the whole conversation. As a therapist, sometimes, I wanted to do that so badly, because sometimes I kind of was like 90% sure what it was, but not 100%. And I couldn't lead it. You have to have it organically come out. Now, after the break, we're going to talk about what things you can do to try to help facilitate that, but we don't want to lead them or offer them guesses. Okay, the last thing that parents often do when they get an I don't know response is they get frustrated, been there, done that, and they take it personally. And so you feel like it's an affront on your relationship. Have you ever had that? Where like they don't trust you enough to talk to you, or they don't love you enough or care about you enough, or feel like you have a good enough relationship to confide in you and let you know what the struggle is. And so people can get angry and hurt. And sometimes that turns into frustration or aggression, or words that you kind of want to take back, or even just body language that says, I'm getting really angry at you. And what's under that is hurt, that I feel like you don't trust me enough to open up, or you're not giving me what I want in order to help you, and you're purposely blocking me. Which hopefully by now in this episode, you're realizing is most likely not the case. I mean, there are so many other reasons why kids say, I don't know, besides just blocking you and trying to make it difficult. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. And when we get back, let's talk about what do you do instead. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
It's time we put help directly in our kids' hands. Introducing Crushing OCD course, for kids and teens.
It was way more helpful than all the other therapy we've ever done because we didn't really know what to do. So we weren't really doing it before. So the course helped to figure out what the exposures are and how to do them.
We're not in therapy and find it really hard to find an ERP trained therapist here. So we're currently with like the public health service, but again, they don't seem to be trained in ERP. It's filled that gap that we don't have that was desperately needed.
This was really well timed for us to use between therapists and to help us get off to a good start with this new practice.
It was easy to use. I was able to do it from my phone or also on the computer.
There's different ages, so there were younger kids, there were teenagers, and so that was really nice too, to have a variety of ages where it wasn't just geared towards younger kids or older kids. It was a nice variety.
It's helpful for our kids to hear it from this third party as opposed to just us saying it.
I really like the offense and defense method. I love working on poking at OCD while it's sleeping. It makes it a little bit easier to do, and it's kind of fun. I'm planning on using it to work on my fear of holding or touching batteries and stuff like that.
So it was really helpful, and I think a lot of other kids would like it. I thought that I was the only one who had worrying about the weather and stuff. And then there was somebody else on there who worried about the same thing, which was really helpful.
Seems less scary to work on stuff now that I've watched this class, and I'm more interested to work on it.
I like trying to do more exposures still, and before I wasn't, I just didn't want to do them.
I've worked on some of my bigger compulsions and been successful.
I realized that it was helpful to do the exposures. Before it was really, really hard. It's still hard, but it's helpful to know that I need to do them.
Before there would be a lot of battles about it, so it is definitely less loggerheads.
Really, really good course and super helpful.
Definitely would recommend this. It's really easy to follow. It's nice bite-sized videos. I really like the worksheets that go along with it, and I think it's really helpful.
To learn more about this course and register your child or teen, go to atparentingsurvivalschool.com.
Welcome back. All right. So in the first half of this episode, you learned my 6 most common reasons why kids say, I don't know, when they are struggling with OCD, the things that we all do that make it worse. And now I want to get into some of the things that you can do to make it better. So the first one, and we've already talked about this one, but I just want to highlight it one more time because I think it's really powerful, is the question, what's the hardest part about? And so I would actually say to kids, what's the hardest part about talking about this? Because their answer, if they give you one, they might say, I don't know, because that is part of this problem, right? But some kids will answer that. And they might say, let's go back up to our list. They might say, because I really don't know what's bothering me, for number 1, feeling overwhelmed. Or they might say, because when I talk about it, it makes it so much worse. Number 2, fear of being triggered. Or they might say, because OCD says I can't talk about it. That's number 3. OCD demands that you don't talk about it. Or they might say, because I don't know, what if I lie? Number 4, moral OCD and the fear of lying. Or they might say, because everything I say doesn't feel right. That one's not as common. But number 5, what if the answer doesn't feel right? Or they might say, it's too embarrassing to tell you. Could be number 6, sexually taboo themes that are too embarrassing. And so how they respond to that question, what's the hardest part about talking about OCD, can be indicative of which number that is. It doesn't always work beautifully, matchy-matchy, but it might indicate a little bit of, that was interesting that she said it's too embarrassing. Or that's interesting that she said it's going to get worse. I wonder if she means OCD is going to threaten her or if she's just afraid of being triggered. So then I might ask further follow-up questions like, does OCD tell you it will get worse? Or just talking about OCD in general makes it worse? Now, that was a leading question. Just got through telling you not to do that. But in that situation, I'm just giving is it this or is it that in a very broad sort of way. I do try to avoid doing too much of that. But sometimes when you're just trying to get them to process further, you get some fruitful answers. Okay, some other things to do. the next two suggestions are they sound obnoxious. But again, going back to the 2 decades of me sitting on a couch trying to get kids to talk, shockingly, this moved the dial for, I would say, 1/3 of them. And 1/3 is better than 0. And so I would do this, not ad nauseum. I don't want to frustrate kids. But when they would say, I don't know, sometimes I would say things like, well, if you had to guess, what would it be? And some of them would actually give me an answer after that. Or if I'd said, but if you did know, what would it be? And sometimes I got answers from that. So those are just little nudges to keep them going. Those tend to work when we're dealing with overwhelm. Sometimes it will work when they're afraid of being triggered. Sometimes that does work when OCD is telling them not to talk about it because I'm kind of still nudging them along. Sometimes with moral OCD that works because they don't want to be a bad person and not answer. And so the follow-up question, they'll answer that. With the sexually taboo stuff, that may not work too well. They might still be pretty shut. But those are 2 follow-up. Once if they're doubling down and they're like, I said I don't know, I'm done with the conversation. Because that goes into the next thing I want to talk about, which is know when to get out of the conversation. This is where I really fail because sometimes I intellectually know and my brain will be like, get out, get out, get out. And I picture it like double Dutch. And I say this all the time. It's a metaphor I use. Do you remember double Dutch? If you're not an 80s kid, maybe you don't. But the 2 jump ropes and they're going back and forth at the same time. And the person has to kind of time it just right so they go in between both jump ropes. And you have to know when to go in and you have to know when to get out or you're going to get hit in the head. And I feel like talking to kids is like that. It's where's my entry point? Got to get in. Oop, I got to get out. And if you don't get out of a conversation soon enough, the conversation can go south. And then it's harder to repair and have a conversation next time. And over time, when you violate those nonverbal clues that they're done talking to you, and you violate them over and over and over and over again, that trust gets really broken and it's hard to repair. Not impossible, but it makes it harder the more you don't respect their nonverbal boundaries. And that's hard when eventually you're getting somewhere and you're getting a little bit of traction. And sometimes I'll get so excited because I'm like, oh, I'm getting a good answer. I'm getting somewhere. And then all of a sudden, boom, they want to shut the conversation down. And I can tell from nonverbal clues or even from verbal clues that they're done. And I don't want to be done. And there are times where I've just ignored all of the clues and I'm like, I'm going to bulldoze forward. And that's never turned out well. That's always a bad thing. So get out of the conversation sooner than later. It's not going to be a one and done. You're going to have many, many conversations to get what you need to understand their struggles. And it's not going to be a one session or one conversation type of situation. Okay, on to the next thing. The next one is a question that you can ask your kids to see if it's some of those theme-based issues that we talked about before. So I would say something like, if they said, I don't know, I'd say, do you think you know, but it's just hard to say it to me? Now, saying that opens up a couple of those themes. So if they say yes, then I can rule out overwhelm. I can rule out the ambiguity of it. And so now I know they know, but they're worried to say it to me. So now, is it because they're afraid of being triggered? Is OCD demanding they don't tell me? Are they afraid they're lying or they're sexually taboo thoughts? So now I have something to work with. And so that would be the beginning of that conversation is, but it's hard to say with me. And then I might say things like, validate, right? Always validate. I get that it's really hard. It's hard. Sometimes it's really hard to talk about these things. Now, I don't want to spoon feed and assume anything. So I don't want to say, I get that it's really embarrassing. They didn't say it's embarrassing. They said it's hard. So be careful with putting words in their mouth or assuming things that they're not saying. And so if they're saying, yeah, it's hard, I just don't want to say it, I'd say, well, I wonder what's the hardest part about it. So that's me pushing a little bit. And they might be like, it's just too hard. And so then I'm not going to say anything. Or I might say, do you think it's harder for you to say it out loud? Would it be easier for you to say it if you wrote it? And so again, coming up with another alternative. Now, if it's sexually taboo thoughts, or even if it's an OCD demand that they don't speak it, sometimes writing it is kind of a creative way around that. Sometimes not. Sometimes OCD's like, I don't care if you speak it or write it. It's all bad and bad things are going to happen to you. But I've had kids say, I could text it, or I can write it and send it to you, or I can draw it. And so coming up with different ways to get them to communicate can be helpful. The other thing is, let's go into like different themes, and I'm going to talk about the different themes and how you can approach those. If your child has moral OCD, where they're worried about being a bad person or doing bad things, and I'm noticing that they're saying, I don't know a lot, and I notice that they're saying, I guess, and maybe, and I think at the end of their sentences, and I know that they're really worried about lying, or maybe I don't know that, and I start to say, well, they're doing everything Natasha said, so maybe that's an issue. Then I might have some direct questions. I might say, sometimes with moral OCD can make us worry about doing a lot of bad things. What are some of the bad things that OCD makes you worry that you're going to do? Did you notice that I didn't spoon feed a response? I didn't say moral OCD will make you feel like you're lying, so are you lying? I said moral OCD will make you feel like you're doing a lot of bad things, a lot of simple bad things. What are some of the big things that OCD says you might be doing? And then if lying is a part of it, they might be forthcoming in that moment because I've kind of given them a softball, and they might say, yeah, I'm worried about lying. And then I follow up and I would say, that could be rough. I wonder, and I love the I wonder because it's not a demand. It's just this abstract, I wonder. I wonder if that could be part of why you say, I don't know all the time, because it's easier to say, I don't know than say something that may not be true. And then if that is what's happening, you'll get this light bulb look in their face like, yes, oh my gosh, I can't believe you got that. Okay, if they have contamination OCD and you're not being able to get to the core of what is the contamination, and you're getting a lot of I don't knows. And with contamination OCD, kids know what's contaminated. That's one of those where I'm like, they know, because they're so worried about it that it's spreading, and they're spending all their energy trying to avoid the contaminant. They absolutely know. Now, there's a caveat to that. If somebody's had OCD for a really long time, they may have forgotten what was ground zero, but I don't see that as much with kids. I see that with adults, because kids haven't been on this journey for a really long time, and so they typically know what is the ground zero of contamination. But if they are a tween or a teen, and all the things that are contaminated are like their bed and their bed sheets and their underwear and the bathroom and the doorknob to their bedroom, and they're not telling me, I might educate them and say lots of things can be contaminated, and I might list them. When I have to guess what something is, I want to do it in the softest way possible. And so I would probably just give a list, and I put the thing that I want, or not that I want, but the thing that I think is going on kind of in the middle. And so I might say things, and this really helps normalize sexually taboo things, is when it's part of a list. And so I might say things like, lots of things can be contaminated, not just germs. And I'm like, it could be dust, it could be plastic, it could be semen, it could be pee, it could be poop. I'm just listing them. And then ask, are any of those? So if you do have to spoon feed it or even guess, doing it in a list way where you're taking the stigma off of the thing that you're suspecting can be a way to open them up and make them feel less judged and shamed around that topic. And the last thing I want to mention is give them space. And this is so hard. This is so hard for me. I guess that's why I keep saying it twice. Because sometimes I just want to know, and I want to make progress, and I want to process it with them, and they're just not there. And this isn't about us, it's about them, and we can't force a person to talk. And so we want to build up that trust. And the big part of building up that trust is respecting their boundaries, getting out of the conversation before you get whacked in the head with the jump rope, and asking them in compassionate ways. What's the hardest part of, and then recognizing when they're shutting down and get out of that conversation. Do not continue. And that is hard because you're going to have like 20 gazillion conversations before you get any progress for some kids. And that's just the reality of it. And sometimes it changes. They go through different developmental stages and all of a sudden they're not as talkative as they used to be. I'm experiencing that with my teenagers. Like they're 13 and 15 and all of a sudden I don't feel like I'm clued in to their anxiety and OCD as much as I used to be. That's developmentally appropriate, but parentally frustrating, to be 100% honest. All right, well, I hope that you found that helpful. I hope that you're finding my podcast helpful in general. If you are, don't forget to hit a star where you consume your podcast. And if you have a few extra moments, if you can write a review, I greatly appreciate that. I feel like I haven't read one in a while, and partly that's because I haven't had one in a while, but I did have one and I forgot to read it. So I do want to thank, I actually have 3, but I'm only going to read one because sometimes I don't get some for a while and then I have nothing to read. So I want to thank Kate May Roses. I don't think I read this last time, so if I did, I'm sorry. But she wrote, I think I read this. Well, I'll read it again. She wrote, only listen to one 30-minute episode and came away with several extremely helpful tips to help my OCD child. Thank you so much. I'm subscribing to learn more. I appreciate you writing that. I do think I read that last time. So I want to read one more. I want to thank Lisa, who wrote amazing tips. Natasha is so easy to listen to, and she gets, probably not today. I have a cold. Can you tell? Sometimes I think it sounds worse in my head than it probably does on the mic, but I know I don't sound great today. But Lisa wrote, Natasha's so easy to listen to, and she gets what we as parents are going through. I've been meaning to listen to her for 7 years now, but kept thinking my child can handle this. Big mistake. Now I'm going to listen every day because already in 2 days, I'm feeling empowered to help my child and more importantly, to teach my child to help herself. Don't wait like I did. Well, I'm glad that you're listening now, Lisa. That's all that matters is what's happening in this moment. And I'm glad I have you as a listener. So if you write a review, maybe I'll be reading yours next time. I'll actually be reading EI2U73's review, but I might be reading yours the week after. I hope that you find the sparkle in everything you do, and I'll talk to you again next Tuesday. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the AT Parenting Survival Podcast. To get additional support raising a child with anxiety or OCD, visit Natasha's online school of on-demand classes at atparentingsurvivalschool.com.